right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second installment of the Arborjet's Roots to Shoots webinar series. The series is designed to teach people and inform people on multiple subjects in the green industry. Last week we covered soil basics. This week we're going to cover soil management. So how to take your basics and apply that knowledge to managing your soil. So again, my name is Zac Purinton. I'm the Inside Technical Sales Support at Arborjet headquarters. I answer all the technical questions that come into the office. So basically, if you call here and ask about your equipment or which chemistries to use, I'm more than likely the person you talk to. I have a bachelor's in plant, soil, and insect sciences from UMass Amherst. And before joining Arborjet, I was a golf course assistant superintendent and superintendent for almost 16 years, and then moved into consulting and sales for turf managers for 2. And since the beginning of 2016, I've been with Arborjet. So last week we talked about soil basics, sand, silt, clay, organic matter. This week we're going to talk about what to do with issues affecting your soil. So we'll start with compaction. Usually the biggest issue that I always found was to be compaction of the soil. Compacted soil creates difficult growing conditions. It's very hard for roots to move through and to grow. And you can see in that picture about 4 or 5 inches down, that really thick, packed-in section. It's probably majority clay. The packed soil, compact soils, make it tough for soil organisms to move, make it hard for them to go find unavailable plant nutrition and convert that into plant available nutrients. Reduces water and air filtration, cutting off oxygen to the root zone as well as water to the root zone, making it very difficult for the plant to breathe and absorb water. It also increases the risk of runoff. So soil or water just running over the soil, not actually getting in there. Also increases the risk of like mudslides and washouts. Reduces water movement down through. So the less the soil can absorb water or have water penetrate it, that really cuts off one of the key needs of root zones and plants. Because most leaf material, woody material can't absorb water. Water needs to be brought in from the root zone. And it reduces the nutrient holding capacity. So again, as the soil gets more packed together, there's less flat surfaces of the soil, less surface area of soil for nutrients to hold on to. So that also cuts down on the availability of nutrients and lowers the cation exchange capacity. Another issue is water, whether it's too much or too little. So over-irrigating, flooding, rain, you can see what happened here. That is probably a channel that the farmer used quite a bit to get to and from an area, so more soil compaction, and that caused the runoff, and you can see actually all that material now ending up in a gully, washed right away. If there was any seed in there, it went away with it. Any plant material would have gotten washed away unless it had really deep roots. So again, too much or too little, over-irrigation, flooding, rain. Too little water, you have drought, no irrigation, watering ban. Again, that makes it really difficult for plants to survive, and why you need to have a healthy soil and a well-managed soil to combat all of that. And again, in the picture, runoff, which leads to erosion, as well as nutrients and soil being removed. So not only are you losing your soil, but you're losing the nutrients that go with it, as well as organic matter and any kind of microorganism that is beneficial to your soil profile. Nutrient issues, too much or too little. If you have too much fertilizer or too many nutrients, you could actually cause fertilizer burn. Like in that top left picture, you can see that the edges of the leaf tissue are orangey brown, that's a pretty good sign that your plant has absorbed too much nitrogen or just too many nutrients in general, and it's actually imbalanced the internal parts of the leaf tissue and actually sucked the water out and drawn too much water away, and that's why the leaf tissues actually look wilted and browned. Too little nutrients, you're looking at chlorosis like in that tree on the left in the bottom picture. Again, chlorosis is a lack of nutrients or a lack of chlorophyll in plant tissue, typically caused by lack of nutrients, which also leads to poor growth, whether it's root or shoot development or even both. And that's always related to availability. So again, moving back to compacted soils, you have a lack of nutrients, which could cause your chlorosis. Another thing that leads to the unavailability of nutrients is pH, and we'll cover that in a bit. So what can you do about any of those situations? Talking about aerification, that has mainly to do with compacted soils. So aerification is a process of relieving compaction. Whether you're moving soil around, creating pockets without any kind of removal, or actually removing soil and organic matter, mainly thatch itself. That can be done in a number of ways. There are many different types of machines that do that. You've probably seen pictures of the strap-on shoes that have long tines underneath, so you can walk around your yard. Those are all forms of aerification, anyway from coring, which is what you see up in the top right, where you actually have hollow tines. So basically tubes that have a side cutout so you can eject what you're pulling out. Those get jammed into the ground, pull out and remove what people call a core of soil, and actually discharges that from there, and you go across your lawn or your green or fairway or wherever you're trying to aerify, and actually removes product from there, allowing what's left to spread out and become less compacted. There's also air injection, whether it's by like a tree spade in that left-hand picture, or the picture below it. It's a machine called an Air2G2. What both those do is they take very high-pressured air and shoot that into the ground, whether it's by a handheld wand like the man is using on that tree, or that machine which has small tines that get pushed into the ground, and then bursts of air come out of those, kind of like a compressed air can like you'd use to clean off your desk or clean out your keyboard. Picture that, but more at like 3,000 psi. There's also water injection. There are a number of companies around that do this. The process is typically called dry-jecting, which is kind of a backwards way because you're actually injecting water. But dry-jecting is a company that does this. So what that machine does, similarly to that Air2G2, is it has a number of tines that get pushed into the ground, and then instead of air, it's hooked up to an irrigation system through a hose, and it actually shoots water into the ground. So as either the air or the water shot into the ground, it fractures, kind of creating a similar view to lightning, what lightning looks like if you see a snapshot of lightning going from the air to the ground, where it starts off at one point and then fractures out into kind of looking very web-like out towards the ground. That's how those work. So as they penetrate, they spread out, creating new channels to allow more air and water to move into the soil. So this process greatly improves water and air infiltration. It creates space for for soil amendments and additions, whether that is organic matter or sand or something else you're trying to put in there. It allows for fertilizer to a deeper fertilization. So For trees and other plants that have deep root systems, 6 to 12 inches, that allows your fertilizer to penetrate and get down farther. And then the frequency that you'd want to do an aerification really depends on the severity of the compaction, how much the piece of land gets used, and and how long the previous aerification recovery time is. So if your soil is very compacted, kind of a clay, it actually is going to take longer for that all to expand. A lot of golf courses that are sand-based will do this once or twice a year. The standard procedure used to actually be able to do this once a month. Back when they used soils that were much more native to their location, so they were a lot thicker. They would aerify once a month. Following aerification, a lot of people will top dress, but you can also top dress just on its own. You don't actually need to aerify before you top dress. Some people just do it. It makes for a good addition to a well-used plot of land. You can top dress with either sand, compost, organic matter, and all that is you're putting it in a spreader and you're having that spreader disperse it over your ground. So you can do that with or without aerification. Again, sand's mainly used by professional turf managers. So, baseball fields, football fields, soccer fields, golf courses, places that are mainly athletic turf use sand quite a bit because it is very hard to compact and can take the beating a lot better. They don't want their turf to hold a lot of water. They don't want their soil to hold a lot of water because water usually makes the soil loose, and people need solid footing, so they don't want loose soil. But a lot of homeowners, and there are a lot of companies that do this, they'll top dress with just compost or organic matter, which can add carbon and help raise and boost the microorganisms and how well they work. So again, adding carbon, like we talked about last week, will boost the production of your your microorganisms, and in doing so will release more plant available nutrients. So it's a way to kind of make your soil work better for itself. And again, so amending existing soil to reduce compaction, that's another function of the top dressing. So whether you're using sand or organic matter or compost, and doing that will increase your water and air infiltration, nutrient holding and conversion, so going from plant unavailable forms to plant available forms, and then also improving your soil health by doing that. The picture on the bottom you can see is a straight shot. The left side was not top dressed with organic matter. The side on the right was. You can see how much healthier that turf looks. So again, top dressing with organic matter or just adding organic matter either right at the beginning is going to help reduce your compaction. Like we talked about last week, it does as well. It is, even though it works very well as a binder for aggregates and creating aggregates, it is very tough to compact. It also will reduce erosion from its ability to aggregate. It'll increase your cation exchange capacity, making your soil able to hold more nutrients, and then also create more plant available nutrients for your plants. It increases your water and nutrient capacity. It's going to boost your soil organism activity, which is going to lead to more plant available nutrients and aids in controlling soil-borne and diseases and insects, and it improves your soil structure. What to do with fertilizer? So if your soils are lacking nutrients, you can always fertilize, whether you're using organic fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer. A quick release fertilizer, which is the nutrients that you're applying are in readily plant available form, or a slow release plant available form. There are many types of slow release plant availables. Most of these are old school is sulfur-coated urea. Urea is a pretty common form of nitrogen. Sulfur is they actually would put a sulfur coating on the nitrogen, so the sulfur would break down with water, sunlight, and time, and then as it breaks down, the urea is released. Updated forms of that are encapsulated, so they're synthetically created capsules that can expand and contract with heat, so that as your soil warms up, they open up a little bit more and keep releasing some of that nutrient. So it's a pretty steady, consistent release throughout the summer. And then there's always the version that you're putting down plant unavailable compounds and then letting your soil convert that to be plant available compounds. And then you should always do a soil test to determine what type or what you need for nutrients, what levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium that you need. And sometimes they, depending on where you live, it also might be state required. Where I live in Massachusetts, phosphorus fertilizers have been banned, except for when your soil test proves that you need at least 1 pound of phosphorus per 1,000 square feet. And as phosphorus is a very soil binding compound, so typically you're going to find a lot of phosphorus already built into there, but the phosphorus isn't plant available. It's actually locked onto the soil, and the plant root doesn't have the ability to actually take it from the soil. So nutrient availability is greatly affected by the pH of your soil. It's another issue, soil pH and how it relates to plant availability. The table on the left shows on the bottom the range from a pH of 4 up to 10. Typically, you're not going to find a soil pH outside of that range or really even getting to either of those ranges. Most pHs are going to hover somewhere around between 6.5 and 8.5. If you do happen to have a nice acidic soil, I think the lowest I ever worked with was a 4.8, which was nice on one account and then really tough when it became to needing my macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So again, pH affects that. You'd also be able to find out your pH through a soil test. pH is very difficult to adjust. It would take many repeat applications of lime, whether that's calcium or magnesium carbonate, and that's a slow reaction, or gypsum, which is a calcium sulfate dehydrate. It's a different form. It's a different formulation. It actually reacts a bit faster, it breaks down a bit faster, so it works a bit sooner than calcium and magnesium or calcitic and dolomitic limes do, but it's no good if your soil requires magnesium. So again, another reason to soil test. The other thing that the sulfate does is when it breaks down into its sulfur actually flocculates soil, so it actually will push soil particles apart and help stimulate some more water and air penetration. So again, all that leads back to before you put down any fertilizer or lime, you should always do a soil test. It's a great tool to gather information. There are many different types. There are home kits. You can send it off to usually your local extension agency or your local ag university. Most of those are fairly inexpensive to have done, and the information is very accurate, and also it gives the students something to do and a good way to use their education. It helps you create a plan on how to go about aerifying, fertilizing, and liming your plot of land. And again, some states require soil tests to determine what amount of nutrients you can apply, mainly in relation to phosphorus. And then doing the soil test will also help you determine what type of lime you need to use, whether you're lacking in calcium, magnesium, or sulfur, or if you're not lacking in either, then that gypsum would be a great tool because it works a bit faster and it also helps flocculate your soil. So again, adjusting pH, you have calcitic and dolomitic limes. So calcitic is a calcium-based, dolomitic is a magnesium-based lime. Those take about 6 to 9 months to even begin to break down and work. And the quantity needed really depends on your current pH and what you want your pH to get to. So again, the farther you want to move, the more product, the more time you're going to need. So if you're at a pH of 5 and you want to get it up to 6.5, that's going to take a really long time. It's very, very hard to greatly change the pH of a soil. It's been there for who knows how long, and it's been that way for that long. So to try to adjust it in something that's been around for millions of years, try to adjust that in a couple years would take quite an act. The other nice thing about calcitic and dolomitic lime is it's really, really cheap. Usually you can get a 50-pound bag, 80-pound bag, which would cover an acre or so for about $5. Gypsum, on the other hand, which is that sulfur, that calcitic sulfur, it's more soluble, which means it breaks down faster, which means it's going to work sooner, but it's definitely not as cheap. There are a couple companies out there like Solucal. They make granulated gypsum, but a 50-pound bag of Solucal would cover about a quarter of an acre, and that's about $30 a bag, at least the last time I had to buy it. So again, both are only slightly effective. It's going to take you years to adjust the soil's pH. The best you can really hope to do is that while you're in that process, you're also managing the soil and doing your aerification or replacing it with soil compounds that will also help buffer. So that's another good reason to use organic matter. Working on irrigation, if you're on a plot of land that doesn't have an irrigation system, installing one is a great way to go, especially one with a rain sensor. It's going to, those rain sensors are very accurate now, and the irrigation system is going to cut down on either overwatering or underwatering. I don't know how many times or how many roads I've almost pulled off of into people's driveways when it's been pouring rain out for 24 hours and I see their irrigation system running. It's just a great way to oversaturate your soil, loosen it up too much, and if you're on a hill, that all your your trees, your shrubs, or your grass could just slide right down. So takeaways of this class, what I'm really hoping is that the biggest thing you want to really do is alleviate compaction. The compaction, it's just been from either foot traffic or cars or farm material or athletes just running around on it. Your soil is going to be compacted, and that's going to affect your soil's ability to bring in water, air, nutrients. So alleviate your compaction through aerification and or top dressing with either organic matter, compost, or sand. Providing proper irrigation, whether it's Mother Nature related, or installing that rain sensor with your irrigation system, making sure that you don't oversaturate the soil and that you're not letting it dry out. Making sure you have proper nutrient levels and proper pH all through soil testing, and applying lime and fertilizer. So with that, that's the end of today's quick lesson. If you do have questions, there is a little talk box that looks like something that you find in a comic strip. You can always type your questions into there. Otherwise, we're available. There's also the internet. It's actually becoming a pretty good source for that stuff. There are a lot of papers written by extension agents. There's turf managers that post blogs, tree managers that post blogs. So there's a lot of information out there on the internet that's good to use. But again, if anyone has any questions for me, you can go ahead and type it into the little talk box. And before too many more people drop out, I will be printing this PowerPoint as a PDF, and I will email it to everyone that attended today.